Okay, so picture this. It's the fall of 1777, and the American Revolution is, frankly, hanging by a thread. But then, deep in the forests of upstate New York, two incredibly brutal battles change, well, everything. They secure a victory so huge it literally turns the tide of the entire war. This is the story of Saratoga, a victory that saved America's future, but also planted the seeds for its most infamous act of betrayal.
I mean, just look at this scene. You've got British General John Burgoyne, one of the Empire's best, surrendering his entire army to a scrappy, ragtag group of rebels. It was absolutely stunning, a world-changing moment. But here's the wild paradox at the heart of it all. The American general who was most responsible for this win, their most brilliant commander on the field, would soon become their most notorious traitor.
And let's be clear, the stakes here were astronomical. As historian Edmund Morgan puts it, this wasn't just some other battle. No, this was the victory, the one that finally convinced France to jump in, to formally enter the war, giving America the money, the troops, and the navy it so desperately needed to have any chance of winning.
So, you have to ask, how did the powerful British Army, the greatest military force on the planet, end up in a position to be so completely defeated? Well, it all started with a plan that was bold, ambitious, and, as it turns out, deeply, deeply flawed.
On a map, the strategy looked like a work of genius. You've got three separate British armies all set to converge on Albany, New York. General Burgoyne comes south from Canada, another army heads north from New York City, and a third pushes east from Lake Ontario. The whole goal was to slice New England, which was really the heart of the rebellion, right off from the rest of the colonies. Simple, right? Well, a map isn't the real world.
You see, the British Army's biggest enemy wasn't George Washington. It was the Atlantic Ocean. Their supply lines stretched 3,000 miles all the way back to Ireland, and it was a complete and utter logistical nightmare. We're talking about food rotting in barrels, powerful storms scattering their ships, and American privateers just picking them off. In one convoy, just to give you an idea, only 148 livestock animals even survived the journey. It was a disaster.
With that supply chain basically broken, the whole grand plan just collapsed. The Western Army got turned back, and the Southern Army, instead of marching north to meet Burgoyne, they decided to go capture Philadelphia instead. So yeah, General Burgoyne, stuck deep in the American wilderness, was completely and totally on his own.
Now here's where the story gets really juicy, because while the British plan was imploding from the outside, the American command was busy fighting its own self-destructive civil war on the inside. It was this bitter personal rivalry between the two top American generals at Saratoga. The two men in question were General Horatio Gates, who was a cautious political type, and General Benedict Arnold, the aggressive, hot-headed battlefield hero. They actually started the war as friends. You can literally see it in their letters. In 1776, Arnold is signing off with real affection and esteem. A year later, it's a cold, dismissive, I am, etc. Ouch. This wasn't just a professional disagreement anymore, it had become deeply personal. And the feud just spiraled downward with all these petty, professional insults. Gates replaces Arnold's mentor. So Arnold, in defiance, goes and hires that mentor's staff. Gates hits back by publicly humiliating Arnold in front of his own men. But the final straw? Gates takes away Arnold's most elite unit, Morgan's riflemen. So on the eve of this huge battle, the American camp was, as one person put it, a bed of festering intrigue. Not great. And it's in this totally toxic atmosphere that the first major battle kicks off. Burgoyne's army is desperate for supplies and a clear path to Albany, so they decide it's time to attack. And of course, true to form, the two American generals had completely opposite ideas about how to handle it. Arnold, ever the aggressor, saw Burgoyne's army exposed and wanted to hit them hard in the woods, where the Americans were at their best. Gates, the cautious commander, wanted to just sit tight behind their defenses and wait for the British to come to them. The battle turned into this brutal, grinding slugfest in a clearing called Freeman's Farm. For hours, it was just this bloody seesaw. Troops under Arnold's command would charge and seize British cannons, only to get driven back by a disciplined bayonet counterattack. The fighting was incredibly furious, often at point-blank range. At the end of the day, the British were the ones left holding the field, so, technically it was a victory for them, but it was the absolute definition of a Pyrrhic victory. They lost nearly 600 soldiers, including a ton of officers, men they simply could not replace out there in the wilderness. Their army was badly crippled. And this is the moment. After a brutal battle that was largely directed by Arnold and won with the blood of his soldiers,
General Gates writes his official report to Congress, and he doesn't mention Benedict Arnold or his division. Not once. It was a stunning, deliberate, public slap in the face, and it pushed Arnold right to the breaking point.
So, 18 days go by. A much weaker and much more desperate Burgoyne decides he has to attack again. And this leads to the decisive battle of the campaign and one of the most incredible acts of defiance in all of American military history.
After the first battle, Gates and Arnold had a massive shouting match, and Gates officially relieved Arnold of his command. So as the second battle starts on October 7th, where's America's greatest battlefield general? He's confined to his tent, just fuming, forced to listen to the roar of a battle he was forbidden to join.
The American forces were fighting like demons out there. In fact, even the British commander, General Burgoyne himself, later said he'd never seen such determined fighting. But the British lines were holding. The battle was hanging right there in the balance.
And that's when Arnold just snapped. He couldn't take it anymore. He jumps on his horse, gallops straight for the sound of the guns, completely defying his commander's orders. He was like a force of nature, rallying troops who were falling back, leading a furious charge that finally broke the British defenses. He even rode recklessly between the two firing lines and somehow came out unhurt. Then, at the very moment of victory, a musket ball shattered his leg, the very same leg that had been wounded years before in Quebec.
Arnold's defiant charge had completely shattered the British army. Their best field general was dead, their key defenses were gone, and now they were outnumbered about 3-1. Surrounded, with absolutely no hope of escape, Burgoyne had no other choice. 10 days later, he surrendered his entire army.
The surrender at Saratoga sent shockwaves across the globe, and it left behind two profoundly different legacies, one of incredible national triumph and one of deep personal tragedy.
So first, let's talk about the triumph. News of this surrender makes its way across the Atlantic, and it was the proof that the world, and especially France, had been waiting for. It proved that the American rebels could actually win this thing.
Once they heard the news, France formally recognized the United States and officially entered the war as an ally. Spain followed soon after. All of a sudden, what started as a colonial rebellion was now a global war. Britain had to fight on multiple fronts, diverting precious soldiers and ships away from America. Simply put, Saratoga was what made American independence possible.
But for the man who was the hero of that battle, this story couldn't be more different. For Benedict Arnold, those seeds of resentment that were planted at Saratoga, the humiliation, the feeling of being unappreciated, they would just fester and grow, starting him down that dark path that would eventually end in treason.
Today, if you go to the Saratoga Monument, it stands as this kind of silent testament to this complicated history. It has 4 niches meant to honor the heroes of the battle. You'll see statues for Gates, Schuyler, and Morgan. But the 4th niche, the one that should hold the statue of the most brilliant and decisive soldier on the field that day, is empty. And it really leaves us with a tough question to wrestle with. How do we celebrate a victory when we've tried so hard to forget the hero who actually won it?